Welcome to Movie Postmortem, where we dissect films of all kinds, whether they're good, bad, or those guilty pleasures we just can't quit. I'm Reggie Hill, and I'm joined by my nephew Isaiah Brown. Together, we're here to examine what worked, what didn't, and why we keep coming back for more. So grab your popcorn because no movie is safe from the scalpel on Movie Postmortem. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we will talk about The Mask, the 1994 comedy starring Jim Carrey. I'm really excited to talk about this film because we've covered a lot of different genres on Movie Postmortem, and this is our first actual comedy. This was your pick, Isaiah, so tell us why you chose this film for us.
Well, one, there was absolutely nothing on Tubi that I felt was worth reviewing today. I looked for like a good 15 minutes. I was like, ugh, let's just buy a movie and review that. That's on the list. And number two, I feel like it's important to do this because you and I were well, I'm a newer fan of Jim Carrey. You've been a fan for a long time. And I've enjoyed this man a whole lot in the Sonic movies. So I was like, you know what? Let's go back a few years and see what Jim Carrey was like back in the day before he started to kind of disappear from the limelight.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think those are great reasons. I remember when Jim Carrey was the funny white guy from In Living Color. I remember when this film came out, and I've enjoyed every stage of his career. So that is very astute. I am a kind of long time Jim Carrey fan. We might cover this other film of his, which is one of my favorites of all time, The Grinch. I watch that
I
film every single year.
Every Christmas, this man will not shut up about the
You know
Grinch.
how much I love The Grinch.
Just
So
will not.
I don't know if anything will take the place of the Grinch in my heart that Jim Carrey will ever make, but I love his filmography.
It's beautiful because on our list there are a few maybes, but I don't think there's a maybe when it comes to the Grinch. You're gonna force me to watch that.
We will have to do that. We'll do a special Christmas episode for the
Yeah.
Grinch. Speaking of his emergence as a movie star, this film came out in 1994. I would argue that very few movie stars have ever had bigger years than Jim Carrey had in 1994. That same year, he released Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and then Dumb and Dumber. All three of those films came out in the same year. The biggest hit globally was The Mask.
He must have been exhausted.
He was probably exhausted. And when I looked at his transition from In Living Color to movies, I would have imagined that these films were further apart in time, but no, he made Pet Detective, then made The Mask, that exploded, then he shot Dumb and Dumber, got a huge payday for that. Then Batman and Robin was the next year. So he was really moving like back to back. Oh, actually, let me correct. I think it was Batman Forever. I
I
can't
was going
remember
to
which one.
say,
Yes.
I was going to say Batman and Robin.
Pardon that. He was different Batman film. But he was moving really quickly and he blew up in large part because of this film. I would argue that this is the film that best uses his comedic gifts, more so than Ace Ventura. You see the things that a lot of people love about Jim Carrey, his talents in The Mask. And we'll get into that as we go through the nitty-gritty details, but this is one of my favorite performances. I hadn't watched this film in decades, and I still laughed out loud in several parts watching this film.
Oh yeah, there were several moments where I full on let out a good good belly laugh, like a good on ho ho ho, you know?
So let's give our overall rating right now before we begin our discussion and whether we think it's a good film, bad film, guilty pleasure, etc. So you can kick it off.
I feel like we have to rate comedies differently. Because like the first like goal of a comedy, like a true comedy, is to make you laugh above all else.
Yes.
Sometimes the story can take a little bit of a backseat for a joke, but if the story still flows good alongside the back-to-back humor, I feel like it still works. And so for The Mask, I'm gonna give it's a 4 out of 5. I'm sticking with that. If once we dive into this, maybe it'll go up, maybe it'll lower. I don't know. That's what I'm going with right now.
I think that's fair. I found myself feeling the exact same way. This is a comedy. Comedies are very hard to review. Comedies are by far the most subjective genre, I think, in film.
Yeah,
What makes
absolutely.
what makes one person laugh may not connect with another person at all. And I think that's fair.
Yeah,
Comedies are also one of the things that I think always age poorly because the humor that people find
yeah,
funny in one decade may not be the same 30 years later. So it's really hard to watch an old comedy and understand why people liked it to begin with.
yeah. There's most definitely a silver strand living somewhere in the mansion in California, just like, oh, this isn't highbrow enough for my taste.
I have the exact same score with my initial rewatch, 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is a good film. It has some issues that we'll get into, but as I said, it shows the real strength of Jim Carrey as an actor. All of the comedic gifts that he has are on full display here. He really elevates this material to be more than a silly spoof of a movie that could have been very forgettable. So that's one of the reasons that, from a filmmaking perspective, that I like it, and the fact that it was one of my favorite films watching back in the day, and even with this rewatch, still funny.
And so first, I'm gonna let you kick off our causes of celebration because I know for a fact you probably have a whole lot to say.
I do have a lot to say in terms of cause of celebration. I'll start with an easy one that I've alluded to already. Jim Carrey as a living, breathing cartoon character. He is the biggest cause of celebration in this film.
Yeah, I have no proof behind this claim. This is just a personal headcanon. But I'm almost certain that his script was only like 5 pages long. The rest they were like, okay, just get on camera and do whatever.
Yes, you can tell a lot of this was improv. It works though. What I realized watching this film is how he is truly a classic comedic actor. I don't think he got enough credit early on in his career for how long of a life, how well reviewed these films would be. The Mask got 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. Jim Carrey got a Golden Globe nominee for this film. It's a really funny film, and it's because he just makes it work. I can't say that we could ignore the tremendous job that the makeup artist did with creating the look of the mask, but so much of it is just Jim Carrey's ability to, even with his face caked with makeup and rubber, he can act through that in a way that his exaggerated features, his mannerisms, show through even the makeup to really make the character come to life. I really think that he just does not get enough credit for how well of an actor, even under pounds of makeup, that he really is.
Yeah,
He just makes it work.
yeah. And while we're talking about this side, let's talk about the other side of Jim Carrey in this movie. Stanley, terrible last name Ipkiss.
Yes. Now,
Just like Sonic 3, Jim Carrey here is playing two different characters pretty much. He's playing Stanley Ipkiss, this humble and really insecure banker. And on the other side, he's the Mask, this pretty much adult Bugs Bunny, if you will.
yes, thank you for reminding me of that. I forgot to actually do the log line for the movie. We're not going to do a full plot rundown. I don't think you
Oh
can do
no.
that for a comedy. There's no point trying. So,
Yeah, this doesn't work like Moonfall, to where we could describe the entire plot and you'll be like, okay, they must have been high when they were watching this movie. No, with revenge comedy like this, you'd have to watch it in order to get it.
yeah, you have to watch it. So I'll give the plot summary. Bank clerk Stanley Ipkiss is transformed into a manic superhero when he wears a mysterious mask. One thing I do want to point out that some people may not know, this is technically a comic book adaptation.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like nowadays more people are knowledgeable about this, but back in 19, when did this one come out?
94.
Yeah, back in '94, people might not have been that savvy about it because for some reason back in the day we just hated fun and liked admitting that we like comics.
Also, I think a beautiful thing to remember, this was before the mass adoption of the internet. So you didn't have nerds sitting in dark corners saying, "Oh my God, they butchered the comic book, The Mask, with this
Yeah,
film."
even though on movie postmortem we're advocates of you have to take the movie like face value, you have to take the movie as is. Sometimes external materials doesn't really if they don't translate into the movie, you really shouldn't bring them up. But here when it comes to adaptations from original source material, that's something you have to acknowledge and remember. Because without the ingredients, where's the final product? Like if you don't know the recipe, you can't make the cake.
This is an adaptation of a Dark Horse comic that was a lot more adult and violent in nature.
Yeah.
They changed it a lot to make it not only a comedy, but a family friendly comedy. And this is the result that you have.
Well,
Well, yeah,
well,
there's a couple of adult jokes in there, but you get the idea based on the source material. It could have been a lot darker, a
well, you
lot
know what? Yeah. How
different.
about let's put it like this: if you're a fan of comedies and your kids are mature enough, or you as an adult are immature enough to laugh at adult jokes, put this on for your family. You'll have a great time.
And as I was saying, that's where the brilliance of Jim Carrey is the biggest cause of celebration for the film. As they adapted the story from its darker source to a family friendly comedy, many other names were sort of attached to the potential film. If they hadn't had Jim Carrey, you can easily imagine this being a Robin Williams film. The other person who they probably would have gotten, if not Jim Carrey, was Nicolas Cage. I can see a lot of other comedic actors of that time doing this material, but I think that Jim Carrey really elevates it with his ability to perform in makeup, full body, his physicality is really on full display here. Where this is a film that also has a lot of special effects, but most of the moments I find the funniest and the best, the only real performance that you see is him coming through the outfits and the rubber mask. He's really making it work. So that's why I still say he's the biggest cause of celebration for this film.
Here's our next cause celebration that I was debating whether or not we could bring up or not before we got started recording. Good Lord, Miss Cameron Diaz.
We have to talk about Cameron Diaz.
We have to.
I remember when I first saw her enter the bank in that red dress in this film. It was one of those rare moments when you are seeing a not just a beautiful woman on screen, but a star. This is Cameron Diaz's first film. She had no acting credits, no acting roles before this film. This is her true debut, and you see on screen why she went on to be such a popular star. She is just magnetic. She not only draws her eyes to you, she is just full of charisma, and you see why she went on to be such a big star. Her character is part of the reason that this film works. You have Jim Carrey as a living cartoon character. She is the woman that this cartoon character goes after.
Well, I was getting ready to say, yeah, for this movie, she's the Jessica Rabbit.
Yes, exactly what I was going to say. She is the Jessica Rabbit for this story. She does a phenomenal job of being that object of desire, but also just being so filled with kind of a quiet grace and charm that you would
Yeah.
see her do later in her other films. That this was just such a magical moment. And you see in a lot of reviews that came out about this film, so many reviewers pointed out the same thing. Cameron Diaz just lit up the screen when she showed up, and in her role, very limited in many ways in this film, but you can't ignore Cameron Diaz as a full-on cause of celebration in this film.
Yeah. And like one of the biggest compliments I can give to her for this movie is that even though the movie does a good job of just getting you to just pretty much drool at your screen while you're watching. It's like, yeah, look at this woman. She's beautiful, isn't she? But also, she's not just eye candy. She's also a character.
Yes, she has a character arc. She's a person who is used to being used as eye candy when you realize that the only reason she goes into the bank is so she can case the joint, have a secret camera in her purse. But she later realizes that the gangster boyfriend who she's dating is not a good person, and she ends up, wanting to help Stanley prevent horrible things from happening. So she has a character arc in the story, saying like, she looks bad, but she's just drawn that way, to quote Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah, this just good job, Ms. Diaz. You realize your criminal boyfriend is a criminal. Wow.
Yeah. The guy that sent you the case of banks we could rob it, he decided later he's a bad person.
Okay, that's me being a little bit cynical here.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
I do have some script stitch ups as relates to her character.
I did say earlier that sometimes when it comes to true comedy movies, sometimes the story has to take a back seat a little bit.
Yes, that is
Well,
very fair.
we'll get to that. I want to say like the next cause of celebration is that even though it's dated so badly because we just didn't have that ability back in 1994, they were incredibly creative with what they could do with the mask powers.
Yes, I would agree with that. This was nominated for an Oscar. This is Industrial Light and Magic. Some of the effects are dated. A lot of them hold up well. You get the idea, as we've talked about before, that a film filled with special effects that are CGI is never going to hold up forever.
Yeah, I love Black Panther, but I do not stop making fun of that CGI rhino.
Yes. Here, it was actually surprising because most of them held up well because, like you said, the way that they use them is so sparingly. And I think a large part of that is Jim Carrey. With Jim Carrey as the character, you don't really have to do a lot of exaggeration on him as the mask. So a lot of it is just kind of the cartoonish effects. This is pretty much like Who Framed Roger Rabbit in terms of the cartoon metaphysical things that happen. If a character's gonna pull out a whole bunch of guns or a hammer and jump around like crazy, they have to animate that. So you have animation not really trying to create something CGI to look very real. But it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb most of the time. There were just a couple of scenes where I was like, that wasn't great. But it was at the time something that was well received.
One of the things that I also noticed is that they were remarkably well with hiding when they couldn't get away with the CGI.
Yes.
Like there'd be moments where like the camera would just cut and Jim Carrey would be in a different outfit, or he would put on the mask behind something, so you didn't have to see him like do that transformation every time. And I give
Yes.
him points for that.
100%. It's the same cheat that they do with the Incredible Hulk. You might have enough money to show him transforming once, but every other time you're going to have him dive behind the couch and then just pop up fully transformed. When he would rip off the mask, you would sometimes see that. A lot of times you would see them cut away so that they don't have to animate that. This was a relatively small budget film, and this was before Jim Carrey could demand, God knows how much money, which he obviously deserves,
Yeah,
for roles. So you get the idea that they did not use a lot of special effects on this film, and that's probably one of the reasons why it doesn't look like a animated mess right now.
yeah, and truth be told, I have no basis for this claim, but I just honestly feel this. I feel like even if Jim Carrey could demand a huge salary for this movie, he probably wouldn't.
No, I think he loves doing this. You get the idea that these are the type of performances that he lived for, and he brings so much to the table. One piece of trivia, I don't like going into lots of trivia when we talk about films, but one I thought was very pertinent to the discussion we're having. The mask with his big green face and these big giant white teeth, those teeth, the prosthetic teeth, he wasn't supposed to be able to talk with them in. It was just supposed to be for like long shots. He actually learned how to talk with those teeth in. That saved them so much money from having to do weird animation and other stuff. And watching the film, I was like, wow, I can't imagine if he couldn't talk while wearing those teeth because that's the character. So his ability to put his entire body to master every single muscle on his face to give a performance, even covered in prosthetics, is just really a talent. Like I can't imagine how skilled he must be at moving like his eyebrows or a cheek or his lower lip in order to get those exaggerated expressions to come through that much makeup. So like yeah,
Yeah,
he really saved the money, I think, just because of what he could do himself. Another cause of celebration, which was something that I didn't really appreciate probably when I watched it originally, but I appreciated it now. The film came out in 1994, but it has this weird kind of aesthetic of like 1940s or 50s Hollywood, where it's kind of like that film noir set where they have swing clubs and big band music. It reminded me of Dick Tracy in many ways, where you're seeing like a throwback to decades earlier, even though it's supposed to be modern. Like even the way the jails look, the lighting, it had this very kind of gothic feel to it, also like Gotham City. So I felt like that was part of that whole comic book origin story that I could kind of see bleeding into even the set design and the production is that, oh yeah, this is supposed to be 1994, but it kind of looks like a 1948 downtown with a, cool swing band club. It was like that made no sense, but like it really fits the dynamic that they have here in the
You
film.
know, it's funny. I had that exact same thought. I didn't really think of it that much, but it was in the back of my head. You might cut this out later. I don't know. But there was a moment there when they locked him up. I was thinking to myself, man, what ho dunk jail do they put him in?
Yes. It really looks like a cartoon jail where he could just stand up on the bed, look out on the bars, and it's the alley right back there. It's not a modern jail or anything. So yeah, like that deliberate aesthetic to recreate that 1940, 50 look, I thought was very charming. And since you mentioned him earlier, I'll give another cause of celebration. Oh, we're giving a lot, but I have a lot that I like about this movie.
Well, again,
Milo,
you're the one leading this one, so
yeah, Milo the dog. Number one, I love animal actors. I hate that so many animal actors have lost their jobs because of CGI.
which
So I
is
love,
also sad. But you have to remember, animals can be incredibly hard to work with.
yes, that makes it even more impressive the amount of acting and stuff that they have. Milo the dog. I don't know if that's actually the dog's real name, but in the film, the dog is called Milo. Milo steals some scenes with some of his antics. He does a remarkable good job of doing the things on cue, maybe the fifth or sixth time they needed him to do so. And I just found the dog be really funny and charming. Just as a dog. Later,
Yeah.
spoilers, you should have already
Well,
watched the film if you're watching this. When the dog puts on the mask, those effects look really terrible. But Milo is just Milo the dog, I really found charming. I have one last cause of celebration I want to toss in. I really like dance scenes in movies. I think dancing is fun, even though it's not a thing that I do and I'm not good at it.
yeah,
I like watching good dance scenes. This film has two really fun dance scenes, I would call it. The first being a very fun kinetic swing dance with Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz at the club. For a film that has so much special effects, a large part of that scene is just the two of them just going at it, dancing their butts off, doing a great job, and it's just really fun. I love seeing Jim Carrey just be able to show that side of himself and that side of the character.
yeah.
Another, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like here on Movie Postmortem, we're not the biggest fans of musicals or things like that, but
Yes.
this movie gets a pass for it because it was so entertaining.
Yeah, and it also is weird. This was before you were born. Swing music made a big comeback in the late 90s, and it was part the reason is like films like this. Like The Mask is one of those things that I see as one of the reasons that swing music kind of had this resurgence where everybody wanted that swing big band sound and it was just really weird and short-lived. Maybe it lasted for like 5 or 6 years. But here in The Mask during that dance number, I was like, oh, I see that. It was really fun in that setting, which makes sense. But it was something that threw me back to remembering what it was like back then. The other dance scene that I really liked because it's just pure cartoon logic is the Cuban Pete scene. I think this deserves a special shout out when Stanley is cornered as the mask by a whole army of cops, seemingly.
Which just
He
showed up
which just
somehow.
showed up and everybody's trained their guns on him. He does what any cartoon character would do. You start a dance number because in cartoon logic, when people hear dancing and music, they just gotta join along.
Yeah, the mask really it really follows the rule of it can't just work when it wants to, only when it was funny,
Yes.
and that's exactly how it works here. And I this is a good attention to detail that I liked. To where like he goes up to that female officer and he forces her to start singing, and she's just like, "Help!"
Yeah, I love that. I love her facial expressions, although she's singing like at the top of her lungs. It's like, wait, how do I know the lyrics of this song? And everybody just gets to it. They get into like a conga line, dancing and everything. It's pure cartoon logic, and it's just really fun. Let's do a quick commercial break, and we'll come back with our causes of death. When you're ready to make an entrance, you need a red dress. Remember Cameron Diaz in The Mask? That distracting woman in The Matrix? And Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit? What do they all have in common? Red dresses. When you wear a red dress, you don't just walk into a room, you arrive. At the Scarlet Statement, we don't sell regular dresses, we sell red dresses. Red dress is designed to make saxophones play, make bullets pause in midair, and make cartoon wolves slam their fists on tabletops. Every dress in our collection is red and designed to get a reaction. Use promo code POSTMORTEM to receive a free wind machine that makes any entrance look like your hair is blowing in slow motion. The Scarlet Statement, because subtlety is for background characters. And we're back.
Here's where I transfer into my cause of death. Maybe this is me personally, or maybe this is an actual flaw of the movie. The mask is so watered down to where it's just a tool that in this movie, I do not believe that anyone in their right mind would throw the mask into the river.
Yes, I understand, and that was something that I wrote down in my notes as well. The mask is poorly explained, and I'm not saying we need a lot of lore about the mask. One of the things that's sort of a throwaway line is whether the mask has the powers of Loki itself. That's another kind of weird comic mythology connection. The mask seemingly gives the wearer the ability to live out their innermost desires. So Stanley kind of being a pushover, it makes him not so much a pushover, but you don't ever really see him struggling with the effects of the mask or a desire to
No, yeah.
not want to wear the mask. Not to say that everything has to be this simple black and white, but I also could see, and this kind of bleeds into a script stitch up, I could see them going with something more like Spider-Man in the Venom suit with the mask, where you really see Stanley becoming addicted to it and not wanting to take it off. Stanley is a good person. That's one of the things I like about him. When he first encounters the mask and he's used it one night, he throws it away. The mask literally boomerangs itself back into his bedroom so it can't be thrown away. You don't ever see him struggling with wanting to hold on to this power. He tosses away like it's nothing.
Yeah, and this is where I actually give the original source material a good point for this because with in the comic he's so destructive and chaotic with a mask. In that situation, you would understand why he would want to throw it away because he's literally becoming a cartoon murderer.
Yes. So the elimination of the serious bad consequences of the mask make it not really an effective kind of plot device here.
Yeah, and we're not saying that he has to become like a lunatic killer. We're not saying he has to go that far, but like you said, do like the Spider-Man 3 thing with the Venom suit to where like while wearing it he goes too far and accidentally hurts somebody.
Yes, and that's where the film does telegraph why Stanley wants to be this version of the mask. There are lots of nods to Tex Avery cartoons, the Looney Tunes throughout his apartment, at his work. You see figurines of the wolf that he turns into when he's hooting and hollering at Cameron Diaz. So you get the idea that that's his innermost fantasy. But you also see him rob a bank just so he can have money to go to a club.
Which is funny because with Toon Powers you didn't even need
He didn't need to
that.
do that. So I thought that was an interesting plot device to get the cops involved and everything else. I was like, well, he didn't really need to rob the
Yeah,
bank.
I'm almost certain he just did that just to get back at that one guy.
Yeah, he just hates the bank owner, so he decided to rob his own bank. So yes, I agree with that. The lack of true negative consequences for wearing the mask is something that I wish they could resolve with the story and with the script stitch up. And I don't care. We can kind of like build these into our cause of death. I felt that that was something they could have done. I like that they showed Stanley being able to win without the mask in the end. I think that's important. I do think that they needed to have some consequences for the mask itself because otherwise it's too good to ever throw away. It's far too useful, which is
Yeah,
why when he throws it into the river at the end, you see other characters diving for him. Like, yeah, why would you toss that away?
yeah. If we're gonna be real here, which we don't really have to, but if you want to be, if you want to do a stitch up maybe, and if you want to bait for a sequel, well, correction, a good sequel, you have Stanley be like, okay, I really don't need this, but he just puts in his glove compartment in the car.
Yes. That's not something you would ever want. And I would say more importantly, what the film showed is just how dangerous it is if it falls into the wrong hands. It seems very irresponsible of Stanley to just toss it into the river. He's seen what happened when Dorian put it on and turned into a cartoon invincible menace. That's pretty bad. So, like, don't just uh, hope that no one bad finds the mask. Actually, destroy it or keep it.
Yeah, it's got like It's got like the same energy of when they just drop the Jumanji board game just into the river.
Like, yeah, it's gone now. Yay, everything's safe. Nothing bad's gonna happen now. Another cause of death for me, I felt that Tina, who is the character we just keep calling Cameron Diaz, her character's name is Tina Carlisle.
Yeah,
Tina and Stanley's romance, the only reason that they are together is because the story demands that they be.
yeah. I didn't know if I was gonna say this or not, but really, with how the two they with how their interactions go in this movie with both Stanley and the Mask, A, them and Stanley barely know each other, and B, she would have been running away screaming because that
Yeah.
guy was he was the Mask was very aggressive.
Yes, and even her comments about, well, it wasn't just the mask, it was the guy you inside who I really liked.
And I was just like, how
Absolutely,
you know what?
absolutely nothing that occurred in the film made you believe that was true. My actual headcanon was probably 2 weeks after they drive off together, they break up because she's like, no, I don't actually like you.
No, not even just like not even just that. Just like, yeah, I still have no idea who you actually are.
Yes, they barely know each other. And in many ways, I think that that was something that probably changed after they brought in Cameron Diaz as the quote, kind of the femme fatale. She seemingly is going to be the person who's evil. She's bad. She's casing the joint, tricking Stanley when they first meet. You see Peggy, this reporter who loves nice guy, she says, but then you realize she betrays Stanley to Dorian and his gang. I get the idea that you could actually switch those arcs and it'd make a lot more sense. I
I
feel
could see
like they
that. Yeah,
probably changed that to where it would make a lot more sense that Tina stays true to who she is and betrays Stanley and, is arrested along with the rest of the gang members at the end. And Stanley drives off in the sunset with Peggy, who said she liked nice guys, is always looking for a guy like him. But they just made it all of a sudden that Peggy betrayed Stanley, and then you never even see her again in the film.
I was going to say, yeah, it was so weird because it's like it felt like Peggy was the role that Tina was supposed to be.
Yes. I feel like this was probably something that switched because they wanted to do more with Cameron Diaz. And I get why. After they cast her, they were like, we got to make her the main, not just the gorgeous woman who Stanley wants. We want to make her the woman that he ends the movie with rather than Peggy because it seemed to make so much sense that Peggy would have been the person that he went away with. And yeah, I get maybe subverting expectations, but there's nothing about Tina that makes me think that she really was interested in Stanley, even though you have her say the lines, well, I really like the nice guy. Like, no, you didn't. You were
Yeah,
using him to case a bank.
yeah. Even with that logic, they're like, oh yeah, the mask was cool, but I like the guy under the mask. A few minutes, remember a few minutes ago when he was dressed as that French dude and he was
Yeah.
really aggressive.
I love
You should be running away screaming.
that was one of the funniest parts to me. What you see there is Jim Carrey as a human Pepe Le Pew. Everything that would just be wrong and politically incorrect about Pepe Le Pew if he was a real person, you see in that scene.
Yeah, which is probably why we don't see Pepe Le Pew in any of these adaptations anymore.
Yeah, they don't really do Pepe Le Pew commercials anymore, I think, or cartoons.
Yeah, that's a character that hasn't aged well.
But yeah, like it just nothing about her interactions with the mask or with Stanley makes you believe the ending. So that's one of the things I would fix with the script stitch up. I think that the arc for Peggy and Tina was switched. I would switch it back. It just doesn't ring true that Stanley and Tina, despite her beauty, that they would end up together. And I think there's a better message there because Peggy, who was beautiful herself, it's like, that object of your desire that you used a nefarious artifact in order to get, maybe that wasn't a honest pursuit. You should be looking for the woman who wanted a guy like you all along.
Yeah, or even better, here's a huge stitch up that I feel like could fix all of this. Lean into the Tina betrayal thing. Lean into like, oh, she's actually just staying around him to scope out the bank. But while they're together, she gets to know the real Stanley, both the mask during the night and Stanley during the day while she's trying to scope out the bank. And make it so like during the movie, she starts to feel like worse and worse about having to trick this guy that she's
Yes.
slowly developing feelings towards. That
Yes.
would make more sense.
Yes, that's very true. You don't really see her have a lot of interactions with Stanley as just himself. So it seems like a very sudden love that she has for him. You don't really get that growing sense of a relationship because there's just not enough there. As I said before, this film is very short. You would probably need another 20 minutes in order to do that. One of the things that I also consider a cause of death is that the third act is really weak. It's very fast. Once Stanley loses the mask, it jumps right into a hostage situation at a charity event, and then the movie's pretty much over. I think you needed more time of Stanley and Tina with and without the mask before you get to that hostage situation with Dorian as the evil version of the mask at
Yeah.
the end.
It's literally just like the last Bad Boys movie to where like, oh, they were just fugitives a few minutes ago, but now all of a sudden we're barbecuing.
Yes, it's very, very quick. So I know for a comedy like this, you don't want to overstay your welcome. I don't think that would have been possible if you had more antics from Jim Carrey in mask version. There's just little of that in the third act. So I think you could add more of that
Yeah.
to the third act. That's the stitch
Yeah.
up I would do.
It's funny because like what we're describing goes from being just a straight up comedy to a romantic comedy
Yes, that's the
somewhat.
hard part to flesh out with this movie. I don't necessarily need it to have more romance. So part of me is like, I'm fine with it being sort of disposable
Yeah.
and
But yeah, but here's the
shallow.
thing. Yeah, but here's the thing that we hate in movie postmortem. We hate it when movies have to do things.
Yes, yeah, do it right if you're gonna do it.
Yeah. I think this is my last cause of death, and I'm really not even sure if this is a cause of death or not. This is really just like maybe it's a cause of death or observation. I'll figure it out later. It just speaks for the time period it was in, but even so, for a quote unquote PG-13 movie, this movie has a whole lot of adult themes and references and jokes for it, to where like some of them I give a pass, but others I don't think so.
One of the things I noticed while watching it, and as I said earlier, I don't think I've watched this in decades. I remember watching it a lot back when I lived at home, but I haven't seen it in a long time. There were some jokes that went over my head, obviously, when I was younger, that I saw now. I was like, oh, that's Jim Carrey ad-libbing and improvising, and he stuck in some more adult humor in some of his scenes. The scene, which is great, it has some more of the cartoon logic when the henchmen are chasing him and he
But yeah,
sets up a
I was going to
balloon
say
stand.
he. This is the scene that was. This is one of the scenes I was especially thinking about when I brought this up. To where like he's doing balloon animals, he gets to the next balloon and accidentally pulls out a prophylactic.
Yeah. Oops, wrong pocket. And this entire scene
Yeah,
is
I'll be
great
honest with
Jim
you.
Carrey work.
For that scene, I didn't remember, so I was like, "Wait a second, was that what I thought it was?" And I rewound it.
That scene has some great Jim Carrey antics. You can tell he improv several moments. Even outside of that, it's just some funny, more adult stuff that he does that you can tell, like, yeah, it earned its PG-13 rating there in the Pepe Le Pew scene. That
Yeah,
scene
well,
is
I was
just
gonna say,
full with so many references and double entendres and things like that that he's using that I liked it, but I was like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten, or I didn't catch a lot of it when I was younger.
yeah, it's funny because like the balloon animal scene, I give it a pass because it was hilarious. But the Pepe Le Pew, I don't give that a pass because even though it was somewhat funny, when he started doing the entendres and he kept getting into her, I was like,
Yeah.
ugh.
The mask would be canceled in today's society.
Oh, not even he wouldn't be in jail. That's borderline SA.
Yeah. This was a fun film to revisit. The leads elevate this material. I can't say enough about Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz. The film is a fun homage to not only the swing era of Hollywood, but also cartoons, Looney Tunes, Tex Avery. If you liked Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you will love this. If for some reason you've never heard of The Mask, you would watch it. You'll see why Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz became a star. I will stick with my 4 out of 5 rating.
But the fact still remains that the writing characters besides our main four are still weak. I'm not gonna get too extreme with this. I'm not gonna get too cynical, but I will have to drop this movie a half star.
Okay.
And that pains me because I had such a great time watching this.
Yeah, for me, that just overruled my desire to kind of knock it maybe half a point. I just really felt that it worked so well in those moments that it really lifted it. The weakest part being that third act where because the mask is so fun, I wanted to see more. It just doesn't have it.
Yeah, but I think I'm gonna stick to that. Maybe one day when I'm bored, I'll rewatch this and maybe see if I still have the same opinions. Maybe because again, we said this before we started recording, but I swear Jim Carrey himself has gone into this movie and changed things around because I did not remember a majority of some of these jokes.
That's why it's fun revisiting things.
Yeah, I miss this.
Yeah, this is a very fun choice. Thanks for picking it out.
Yeah. Real quick. Wait, stop. Wait, before we end up, we almost forgot to give this movie the biggest like cause of celebration.
Okay, what is it?
Jim Carrey's one-liners in this movie.
Oh, true. Like I just can't separate him from that. He is so good and memorable. And I remember when all of his one-liners from this film were just things that people said or imitated all the time. That's
Brother,
what I said. Like I think this is one of the reasons why 30 years later, this is still one of his best, most memorable performances. And I think it really cemented him as an iconic comedic genius.
dude, like even though it's been like a good 10, 15 some years, man, I'm old. But since I've seen this movie and I only remembered like 20% of it, to this day, smoking and it's party time. P-A-R-T. Why? Because I gotta.
Yes.
They are in my vocabulary to this day.
Yes, like I said, like it's really iconic. I feel like it stood the test of time. It was one of the reasons why it was well reviewed critically back then. And that's one of the funny things to think about. A lot of Jim Carrey stuff I think people didn't like critically. This is a film critically that got a lot of praise. He got a Golden Globe nomination for this film. I think that it really showed his potential as an actor. He's gone on to do more drama and comedy, but I think his physical comedic gifts were well displayed here, and it shows with just those one-liners. All of those are iconic and quotable and memorable to this day. That's a true cause of celebration.
Okay, I'm just glad I remember that before we closed down because that was gonna bother me later.
So that's it for this episode of Movie Postmortem. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us 5 stars because even bad podcasts deserve a good review. Remember, whether it's good, bad, or just a guilty pleasure, every movie deserves a postmortem. Thanks for listening.
And as always, smoking. We'll see you next time.